You're right. Okay, we'll go ahead and call our Board of Education meeting to order, September 5th, 2023, at 6:01 p.m. And let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Lori, would you please take roll?
Christopher Abel. Biff Hansen.
Here.
Matthew Fitz.
Here.
Stacy Seldner.
Here.
Matthew Spalding.
Here.
Carrie Trask.
Here.
And Tony Lastelica.
Here.
Okay, and we will go jump right in to our budget strategies and forecasting.
Okay, yes, had a little bit of a minor adjustment to this budget or to this agenda item. I had a memo included in board book and I'm going to touch on the highlights and take questions for this. Just due to where we're at with the final reconciliation of items in the budget, we decided to postpone Mike Clark discussing some of the more finer details until next week. So we are very, very close with the process, but just wanted to make sure we felt confident with what we had, and we're very, very close, like I said. So, you know, as mentioned since the last memo that was shared in July, our equalized value came in at 14.6%. So that really changes a lot of the scenario of how our original projected impact of $7.20 really equates. So to make things even, our goal would be to come as close to $6.26 to be equal to what we went to the tax base for the operational referendum. So so that's part of what we're looking at right now as we speak and tying things out. So
You use the term significantly less. It really is it significantly less?
correct, yes.
Okay, so we can talk to the voters about it. How the referendum really did not.
Say that one more time. I'm sorry, Carrie. I'm not sure I understood.
The projected mill rates were significantly less when considering the assumptions used in the referendum.
Yes, well,
Explain that.
what that means is because of the 14.6% increase of equalized land value, what, you know, that means to the taxpayer to have the same impact on their tax, the mill rate would have to be $6.26 versus the $7.20. So that's one piece of the puzzle, okay? So what we didn't know when we went into the operational referendum is that we were gonna have increases in state aid and the low revenue ceiling, but also additional expenditure liability for vouchers. So all of those factors play into what we're.
So we knew all that, yeah.
We do know all of that
Yeah.
now. So, so our goal is to come as close as we can to that $6.26, but we do have additional costs of, you know, five to $600,000 of vouchers, for example. So that's something that we couldn't have anticipated before, even compared to what we projected, 2.6 million, that is even higher right now. So does that help answer that, Carrie?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Can I just ask, go
ahead, yes.
I have a question. The 14.6 that you're using that's from the Baird report that you got?
Correct.
Now, is that adjusted for inflation?
Yes. It includes inflation, yes. And it is primarily inflation, so that's where the $7.
That is adjusted?
You know, it includes where $7.20 now is equal to the $6.26. So that's where the majority of it was inflation. So that's why we have to be mindful of that.
So it's 14.6 is kind of it doesn't really mean anything because of the inflation.
In a sense, yes, I'm trying to think here. It just all, you know, when you're measuring things equally about what we told the taxpayers, about what the impact would be of the operational referendum, to equate to what we originally told, considering that 14.6% increase, we'd want to come down to the $6.26 as close as we would if we want to make things equal. So it's not all inflation, but primarily it is. So like I think looking at the net new construction for the county, it was between 1.5 and 2%, I believe. So there is a small amount that isn't, but most of it is. So that is one of the things that I've been working with, just in looking at all the different factors as well to make sure that we have everything accounted for and, try to keep as close to that for what we present in the budget and have budgeted. So, and then it's up to the board too, if you would, we will have, a significant amount under levied for what will be presented, but then there's always the option for the board to consider taking different paths with that. It's ultimately the board's authority to pass the levy and the budget every year. So what I'm merely doing is bringing what was budgeted based on the forecasted, the projected amounts, and then the new factors. Some of the other, one of the other major pieces, we're actually on the top of the second page, we have our membership count, which will take place on September 15th, the third Friday count, and we have declining enrollment. So we've adjusted for about 30 students coming off. So that's where I look at the numbers with that in Infinite Campus. I can get closer projections, but it's all sort of a moving target at this point. Open enrollment, I've asked Amber Kipe, our open enrollment specialist, by the end of this first week to give me tighter numbers. Where are we at for the year? Because we don't do a definitive registration system, it's harder for us to really say like, okay, we know we have this many students coming until the school year actually starts and they start taking attendance. We'll have some students that'll apply for open enrollment, but they'll apply at multiple districts and then sometimes they change their mind, and so there's a lot of moving things with that. State aid is finalized on October 15th, and the most interesting thing with state aid this year is that the aid estimates that we receive in July were off district-wide for all school districts. Racine's school district was one where they're bringing information to do the calculations into a program, and the system's not working well yet. So it's one of those things that we had to really depend upon and use our budget model in order to do our aid projections. So that's another outstanding item. Also the voucher increases, I mentioned that already. You can see in the middle of the second page, they have the amounts per student that the choice schools are increasing. So that's an additional major impact. So some districts are talking about the fact that we received additional funding per pupil, but we have additional liability with the voucher cost, which is huge. I mean, ours are over $3 million, and was talking, Lori and I were talking today. Remember, it was $125,000 just 6 or 7 years ago, and it's just ballooned. So, and we're not alone in that. The number of districts impacted by vouchers in the inception 7 or 8 years ago was very small, and now it's a large amount. And while we have to budget as an in and out, but it does impact the tax levy. So there's many moving parts also specific to our district last
So
year.
in the voucher thing, do we get their head count? Or just our own in terms of state aid?
We are aided on all students that are in our membership area. So like,
Okay.
let's say, yeah, so like if we pay out for open enrollment $8,000, we'll still get $11,000 in aid. We'll still get that aid for them, but we're paying out the majority of it.
Okay.
So, yeah, no, that's a very, very good question. So, just as a district too, one of the moving parts that we're managing at this point is that we were balancing our budget with ESSER funding. And part of that was a significant amount of one-time, or not one-time funding, but like ongoing staffing costs. So it's just one of those things where we're shifting, as other districts are, from receiving a lot of federal funds to shifting to more local funds to support these items that carry through. So so we're getting there, and next week we'll be able to have a full detailed report, and Mike is able to come then. We just wanted to make sure we were all set with some firm details so we could have a very good discussion around those items.
Yeah.
I'm happy to take any other questions or.
So a couple takeaways from what Angela was just mentioning. First of all, she was referring to the goal in taxpayers, in terms of what taxpayers might be expecting. Another takeaway, though, that you need to understand is you're authorized to do something to be a lot higher than what the taxpayers might have, just so that you're aware of, the one side to the other side, and then your decision somewhere will be in between. The second thing was that she was identifying assumptions. There's revenue assumptions, and so we have to reconcile, geez, student count, if it's less than we projected, that means a loss of revenue. You see how this is, and it gets complicated because it's more than a year because the state averages certain things, so it gets a little complicated. We just talked about the choice voucher, and so while we're talking about the taxpayers, and the taxpayers are saying, okay, I'm kind of getting this, but you're just asking, you're gonna spend additional amount of money, but they have to recognize, $750,000 more than we thought we had to throw through the vouchers. I mean, you see what I'm saying? So it makes it like we're asking for more when some of this is we're fulfilling the state requirement.
Yeah, right.
That money has to follow the student. So just some things to keep in mind. And the other thing you have to recognize, and even more so now, we've got a sophisticated system to help us. But that's complicated too, in terms of making sure that because it says you don't have to have the same manpower sometimes once you get the system working. But does anybody remember the Hidden Figures movie?
No.
The Hidden Figures movie was in the space, we almost lost the astronauts. And that was the African-American women who were behind the scenes who were mathematicians. And they kind of left the system and went back to the experts. That's kind of Angela doing the cranking and trying to make sure that the system is given, so just keep some of these things in mind. You're talking about an $80 million budget. You've got a short window, to be able to digest now all these things that are now starting to materialize in terms of getting to actual. And we're not still there, and you can see some of the dates at the state or with Access, they're still not until October so, it's kind of hard because you're almost kind of playing catch up because you get things at the last minute and you're trying to make sense of it so that you're making informed decisions. So that's just providing a little context there.
So am I assuming next week in that meeting, we'll probably be given 3 different options? And then we'll be able to explain the impact on the taxpayer, on the district? That's what we're looking for next week?
Yes.
For discussion.
Maybe, no action, just discussion?
Correct. Because then what needs to happen from that point is that we have to prepare for the budget hearing, so that has to be noticed, and then we have to post sort of the preliminary budget as it stands at that point in the paper. Okay, so usually the budget finance committee would just give a blessing on it, and say
Well,
like.
there's a lot of different uncertainties about this.
Yeah.
Correct.
It's not an action, but it's a consent, in terms of it makes sense of where you're going for the budget, that you're gonna do a budget hearing, and then you're gonna come back and asking us at that same right after the hearing, act on the budget.
Yes.
When do we do the drop dead vote on the budget?
End of October.
End of October.
So what happens is we do the budget hearing, and then the board should, or typically formally approves or adopts, or not, approves the preliminary budgets, the better term, in that October 11th meeting or 10th meeting.
I guess I'm gonna try to kind of wrap this up.
Yep.
In saying that, could I ask for, 3 options, and then I'd like the impact on the taxpayer, and then the impact on the school district. And I would like those 3 examples explained. We can edit this, but I'm trying to have us so we can kind of wrestle with quantitative information to say, hey, this is the impact on the taxpayer, this impact on the district, what we can do with these funds or what we shouldn't, or we can, and then we can still pick a something else completely. But I think if we have kind of a narrowing window, the impacts on both sides of the district and the taxpayer. Because then because right now, you articulated pretty well, but it's still, people kind of
You need the detail,
You need-
and I
you need-
understand.
You need to kind of like make it common sense, like, hey, this is how it's gonna affect
Yeah,
our
right.
community, this is how it's gonna affect the district. So that's, I'm just talking, you know, I'm saying if we could somehow
No, that makes
have
perfect
the
sense.
person that's the professional
Yes.
articulate the impact on both sides of it, and then we will have to wrestle over it, and make a decision.
Yeah, if I could quickly add, what would be super helpful is if we could easily explain to taxpayers the net impact, right? So
Yeah, right.
we gave them a story last April, right, with the referendum. And, you know, really what I would love to simplify it is with the changes that we just talked about, right? It sounds like a minor decline in enrollment. It looks like some of the formulas got moved around, however they do that with equalized value. That all sounds great, but we need to simplify it and just to Joe Schmo taxpayer, here's how this is gonna change, if anything. And really what I think we should strive to do is not deviate from what we promised them last April.
Kind of come close.
So that would be
But we
one scenario.
we did get more money from the state per student. I mean, we got
We did.
$325 more per student than we did.
We did, but
Also down on enrollment.
Yeah, but still, I mean, there's not enough to wash that out though.
in my understand, if I understand it right, it sounds like there's just, with all the equalized value changes, that's kind of complicates things, because it's basically just changing the formula on how they would.
Correct, that's what Biff explained.
Yeah, and then that's really, I guess what I'm getting at is I'd like to avoid a situation where we end up taking more than we told them we would. Does that make sense?
Well, we'd like to do that, yeah.
And that's my concern with, how do we show the taxpayers, and I don't know if it happened outside the city limits, but Manitowoc taxpayers, everybody had a reevaluation of their property.
Yeah, right, yeah.
That's
How do
happening.
we show them that, oh, we're not just taking the extra from that reevaluation, that, you know, how do we show that what we need is what we need, and not just based on a reevaluation that jumped the value of your house up $100,000?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's my concern. How do you do that easily?
Right, no, and I fully agree, I'm gonna be one of those hard sells. This last year that we had, I believe it was a 5.18 mill rate, and I was expecting, cause anybody who has a house and has their escrow built into their payments, I was expecting it to even go down a little bit. It's foolish me, but everything else that's going on in the state and whatever, whatnot, my mortgage payment went up $100. So now, after I've gotten this, and I see that my land value went up like $80,000, I'm seriously petrified to see what my payment's gonna be come the beginning of the year. I'm freaking out, seriously. So this is one of those things it's gonna be a hard sell.
And Mike and I have talked about, Mike Clark from Baird talked about it as well, because I shared that unique aspect with our city, and so we just had this reassessment, and people are concerned, and they should be. And one term that he uses and Ken's used this before when we've had conversations, if all things remaining equal, so like if everyone's, let's say like my value went down $80,000, I'm just making this up.
It didn't.
And Stacy's went up
all went up.
$200. If it was all like this, then we would be impacted, the people that went up would be impacted more. But it should, and I don't know the details exactly, but like if everyone went up, then the impact is spread evenly across everyone, as I understand it.
Correct, which is,
Sure.
That's
Should
correct.
happen.
Yeah,
So it's a sticker shock, right? So I had my own house
Yeah, a little bit.
reassessed last year, and I opened mine up, I'm like, wow, the guy was pretty close, he was off a grand, you know? You know, but that's where it's gonna depend, you know, for everyone, and then every municipality varies too. Sometimes districts will have it where, you know, like, for example, we could have it where Newton goes up a lot, and then, and that they're more negatively impacted than the city of Manitowoc compared to Centerville, you know, so that's where no one's ever going to be exactly the same.
You know, I think going back to, you know, what Matt had suggested was providing some alternatives with an explanation, help you. make your
that, and I
decisions.
think,
That was
I
a
think the other thing kind of going in line with Tony is making it relatable.
Yes.
Right, really finding a way that we can, you know, working with Lisa, working with Baird, how do we make this relatable to our taxpayers so they can very clearly understand
Yes.
what happened and what the options are that the board has to choose from.
Yes.
So,
And I
I can
think,
quickly add to that. I'm not sure if this is possible, but it would be great if we could show them, look, before they change the formulas, here's what you would have paid, right? Let's just pretend that equalized value never happened, and here's what you're gonna pay now, right? And so if they can see that difference is really negligible or not, maybe very close to what we thought it would be, I think that might be easier to stomach, because obviously everyone sees that tax assessment and they're like, whoa, like this is way bigger than what I'm used to. But then if I understand it right, the rate's also a lot lower. So the net is really what we're worried about, right? So the net is gonna tell us the story behind how is this really gonna impact you at the end of the day? And that's,
And the referendum that was approved, that's a dollar amount. That's your authorization.
right, not a percentage.
yeah, and I guess on that note, I just wanna make sure, we just wanna be aware of the environment that, a lot of people are.
Without question.
Are, not in a position where they could just, pay more in taxes. I don't think anyone is really eager to do that, but, we need to just find a way that we could, explain this easily and minimize any increases from what we originally told people we would need.
Yeah, we have to cover our own credibility too. When you go for a big referendum like that and you say, well, it's not gonna be it's gonna be a big bite, and then it turns out to be a big bite, it's just like, well, beware of the next ask, okay? So
So
just in general, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, it sounds like, that you all understand where we're coming from and that, what we're looking for in order to, communicate to the public, but also, understand as a board what our options are, moving in. Because this also not only impacts this next year, but also moving forward, for our district as well, so.
and we're really in a hard place because we don't wanna loot and pillage the schools either. I mean, we've got stuff to fix and we've got students to teach and teachers to pay.
Right.
And it's a tough place to be.
And just in general, we knew there was gonna be an increase and we communicated that and educated the public on it. So it's we wanna be very careful to make sure that impact isn't significantly, or as close as we can, it isn't significantly greater than that. The little chart that's at the bottom of the memo, I think that is something that we can use to show like a year one value and then the next year's value. So we'll put something together that's easy to understand.
So how optimistic are you to make us happy?
We can bring it down, I'm hopefully pretty
Okay.
close to $6.26. I'm
Okay.
not sure we're gonna meet exactly, but
Okay.
that is the goal, and we have some tweaking to do in here that we're on the task, so.
That's good.
It's hard with the vouchers increasing too, and and to speak to the equalized value, the information historically in DPI's website back to like when I was born in 1979 or 80, when that started, went up the most last year and this year. So where you would have like 2-3%, the average increase over all of those years, and including the 16.9% last year, was like 3.74%. And so that's where that brings another piece to navigate as well that we're not used to balancing. So it's all the moving parts, so, yes.
I guess my last comment is, everything has consequences, and as a country, we wrote checks that we couldn't cash, and now we have inflation. And inflation is a taxation on all people that can't afford it, and this is what we're seeing as a result.
Yeah.
And this is the truth of what happens, and now we have to explain this to our voters, which they already know.
They're not
The
gonna-
dollar ain't worth SHIT, and we're gonna keep on feeling that, so. But this is the consequence of giving money away.
Well, I appreciate the work you've done so far, and I think we all look really forward to seeing what those options are next week and drilling down a little bit more on how we can communicate that. Any other questions for Angela before we move on?
That was good, Angela.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, no, thank you for all the info. Oh, that's a lot.
And anybody that wants to just join Angela and sit by her desk for the week to learn more, I'm sure she'd love that.
I get a headache in the first hour, I guarantee you. No way.
Okay, helpers, many hands make light work.
The next is our CISA 10 facility studies update.
And then you can, start it off.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we've been gearing up to do our facility assessment. We're really excited to have the opportunity to work with CISA 10 and really dig in. I think this has been a conversation in the making, and as Carrie referenced, and we continually discuss our ongoing needs for the district. So Mike and Christina worked hard to put together a document for you today that outlines sort of the a list, like a long-range plan updated, so to say, of what we've got going on for this year and the future years. If you'd like to talk about that a little bit, and I'll get the presentation prepared.
We've got the 5-year plan on here. The first 10 lines are really the closest because that's what we've been working on this year so far. And we're more than half done on everything that we're working on there. As we've gone down, like the next year, that was from one of the earlier line items that we put out to you guys to kind of a plan, but like I said, I'm new in this position here, but I've been learning an awful lot in the last few months here. And I can see that these lower ones, these following years, year 4 and 5, are gonna change dramatically. But that CISA program is what's really gonna drive the rest of the planning on here. Like I said, when they start here, when they're gonna be on site here in a couple of weeks, I'm gonna spend as much time with them as I can because I wanna see every brick and every corner of every school in this district. And then I'll have a good idea with it, where we should go, what we should be doing, and where our money should be flowing. So, but these first couple of projects, we've gotten quite a bit done here already with the last Wednesday, that was at the Jefferson Playground project there. That's not on this list. But that was a nice completion there with the boilers. That was a big project this summer. And while that was going on, then the Lincoln, we've got some pictures.
Oh, yeah, we can go on to this, let's see here.
There's the
Oh, yeah.
playground ribbon cutting.
That looks great. I'm not sure if everybody had a chance to see it.
Yeah, it looks great.
It is beautiful.
You'd have to see it before to know how great it is now.
Right.
I was telling Carrie, I met a gentleman this weekend, I'm putting him around 70 years old, but he said when he was in first grade, he went to Jefferson School, and he said, I slipped on the playground in the wintertime, I went down, he said, I ended up with a concussion. He said, I know exactly what you're talking about with that project, so. And also on that last slide, you can leave it there, but that whole boiler project was completed too, and I think on the 13th of September, the manufacturer's rep is gonna come in and we're gonna fire up the boilers. Everything's ready to go on it, but they'll just give their final blessing on that, so that project will be completed.
And that one was part of finishing ESSER 2 money as well. So
Oh.
that one along with the heat coil that's on the next one,
Yeah.
so. That all has to be experienced or spent by the end of this month, so.
So we put that heat coil project, it was something that had to be done, but Schultz was able to slip that in quickly and get that done for us. It was gonna be done a few weeks from now, but they actually had some time and that's done right now, so that's completed as well.
Nice.
What's next? Tree removal, we had with all of the emerald ash borer and that going on, we set aside some money to go after the trees, and the maintenance guys are working on that constantly, but that storm just threw everything out of whack. And but we've got everything from the storm cleaned up, that's all done, and everybody's back on task now, so. I don't know if we're gonna get all of those ash trees down this year, but that's our target by the end of fiscal year to
How many
have.
trees you think we got take down?
I'll say 50. Kind of a guess. I'm so concerned about those dead branches. That's what bothers me, because our maintenance staff is always picking up debris before they mow the lawn and all of that.
Sure.
But there's some large branches down there, and kids like hanging out under those trees, and
Right.
so that's what we're going after, quickly trying to get rid of those.
Good.
So what is radioactive waste disposal? Is that for science labs or?
Yes,
Okay.
that's one that I inherited from the previous list, but it's something that has to be taken care of in science labs. That
The
happens.
glow in the dark, if you fix that.
One of the other projects we did was the Madison office, school office and the principal's office. There was some asbestos flooring in there, so we had that removed professionally. And then we had new carpeting and flooring installed in there. And then we painted up the offices for them as well. So they're happy with that. That's good. SFA classrooms, all of these were all with the logos of the schools that we touched, but the bigger ones were Jackson and Madison School, where we had those concrete tiers in there. And we weren't going to be able to get those done until October sometime, but Seiler Construction came in and said, we'll take care of this for you. And then Eric Wergen too, from Caden, stepped up and said, we'll get this done before school.
I'd just like to identify, you know, in terms of the, how much or so long you wanted a long-range plan. You know, and so you've got some things laid out here. We know that there's more to consider. But what is also important is that you recognize that, you know, that when you have a plan, then you know what you might have to adjust if something else came up. SFA came up, and all of a sudden it had to make sure it had room to house all the material. And I really have to give Mike credit, because we could have easily just said, we just can't do this, or what. He made it happen by finding the right people and bringing this about. So I do want to acknowledge the human element in this too, in terms of that some nice work has taken place here to
Well, I'll say,
adjust and prioritize some work.
Yeah, that's great.
I say thank you for that, but I'm gonna pass it right along to the contractors that because their first answer was, there's no way. But then they moved things around for us too, so that they care about the district as well.
Thanks.
Cool.
I had one of the SFA coordinators that was very hesitant about everything being done in their classroom. And they were happily surprised that they came back and it was all done. So that's a shout out from one of the coordinators saying, you did an amazing job. The community did an amazing job coming together to get this done. That just shows how, you know, people make adjustments to get things done for our community. So thank you. And it was a positive note from one of the school SFA coordinators as well internally. So put that on the survey.
Yeah.
What do we have next? Well, yes, tuck pointing on that face right below the arrow there. They just finished that up this last week. So that's all done.
It seems.
She had someone on the roof waving. Oh, do you want me to go back?
Then the other arrow, that was for the auditorium roof. They were able to get in because of the good warm weather that they had on all their other projects. They were able to come in early. And that's completed up there.
Does that fix then the leaks that were happening?
Not in the auditorium. Just on the stage area. Those are probably the ones you're referring to.
Okay, okay.
Just as I came in, I started hearing some stories about that. That takes care of that area, yes. But as Jim was doing his presentation to the,
That's the ones I was thinking of, so not
Okay.
those.
no, I called Craft Roofing and asked them, those are just two patches. That's what those are going to be.
Okay.
And they are coming this week to take a look at them. And I think that's something they can get done in a day's time. So-
Okay.
But we're addressing that and taking care of it as well.
This is refreshing compared to what we were told a year and a half ago, years and years. and
Seeing
years.
stuff done, yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Painting of the district office. I asked Jim if he didn't mind if we went pink or something on it. He said no.
I like pink. I wear pink all the time.
It's salmon, it's not pink. Salmon.
So on this side of the building.
Look at this guy right here.
Don't hate on pink, man.
They started painting over here today for the finish coat, so that'll be the most of it. But on the front then, we picked out with Bruce Connard over at Lee's Color Studio, that brick area, we're looking at painting that over that brick and going with a darker brown so that those letters stand out a little bit better.
Okay.
You can see them, so it'll be a nice fresh look all the way around, and they should be done within a week. Upcoming projects.
I just have a couple questions. I remember we had to submit something to the state. Was that what this was? We had to submit something about what our plan
We
was.
use this to justify, but we are also going back and forth with referendum. Did we need a facilities referendum? But we had to submit something to the state to use Fund
46.
46.
Okay.
So yes, you're right in terms of remembering what we had previously.
So from a budget standpoint, and that's part of the details we're tying out as well, you know, we can, since we put $1.4 million into Fund 46 as we plan for this budget, we can also look to add and propose to take care of more projects because of that funding as well. So there's a 5-year waiting period when you establish that fund. So like right when I arrived in the district, we were almost through that waiting period. So that's where it's a new thing for districts to really truly be utilizing and managing. So it's wonderful. I am so grateful the district established that because that helps us in a lot of ways.
So when we get to year 2 here, is that this year? When it says year 2 that we were gonna start in the orange there?
area.
No, that will be next
Okay,
fiscal year.
okay.
Are you taking these are these listed in order of their being addressed?
No,
Oh, okay, all right. And I was just looking at the arithmetic at the top. The amount in the budget is $3,750,000, and the projects listed, the total of the projects listed is $3,536,000. Isn't that a plus? Don't we have a plus, a balance in the budget plus?
Just the amount remaining to budget on there. What this is a kind of an artifact of when we were looking at what we could manage in the budget if we were to not have the referendum pass, and then if it did pass. So the 3.7 represents like now that we figured there was about $250,000 in the budget before that additional funding was added, and then with that's the additional amount.
Okay.
And what it allows us to do, so take care of a lot more extra projects.
Any other questions at all?
I have a question about CISA 10. Now we're at the end. Now it's fine.
Sounds okay.
So what do you think you're gonna do? So how are you kind of rolling around with the ideas of taking the information from CISA 10? Are you gonna try to like war room, figure out how you're gonna take care of what you want or bring it to Jim? Or how do you think that's gonna unfold coming up after you start getting reports from CISA 10 about the facilities? It's kind of a question for you, Mike.
that report is going to be given to all of us. And I don't know how it all depends on what the report comes up with.
Yeah.
What they go after, because they're going to be looking at more than facilities also. They'll be looking at the population of our students.
Capacity of schools, even all that stuff. Are the facilities serving our instructional needs? Something we haven't necessarily thought about because it's been largely bricks and mortar. You know, just as an example, we have not replaced furniture in an awful long time. It's really a high priority. You know, so there are many things to consider. I would always be looking in terms of what are all the experts telling us in terms of how urgent is a facility physical structure need. Also from the instructional thing, if there was a need, you know, that we could really, I'd be looking at that, but then it would be bringing you all the information as you suggested. Here are options. This is my recommendation.
So I'm hearing this correctly, that Lisa 10 is gonna present more than just the information about the needs of the facilities. They're also gonna highlight the needs of the student learning.
Yeah, they're going to make sure that they're listening to our instructional people also in terms of are these
So
needs
are they
being.
gonna be surveying principals?
They will be,
How
well,
does
that was one of the things that, you know, we're not just going to send them out to principals. Some of our principals are new. So this comes back to our instructional leadership team in terms of, I mean, just like we recognized we had an SFA need that needed to be met. And so we made adjustments for that. So that's that type of consideration that we would be given. But again, we would bring back to you all options, how we prioritize this and what our recommendation would be.
I just don't want it to be a mile wide and inch deep.
No.
I wanna know the facility status.
Right.
And it makes sense to have the learning needs being addressed within that.
Right.
So I'm eager, I thought maybe there was going to be more to dive into about, individual needs of the facilities.
I mean, that is most definitely, I mean, as Mike said at the very startup,
Yeah.
these numbers are going to change potentially dramatically from what you've seen. And they're also going to say, I mean, we even talked about issues, are they safety issues or are they getting close to those points? I mean, that's why, you know, we started talking about giving the go-ahead for fundraising for the track because we recognize we've been able to patch and correct, but for how long before it does become a safety issue? All those things have to be considered. Most definitely, this is largely on facilities, but facilities are here for a purpose.
My last question before I stop talking is there a timeline for, are they gonna attack one facility at a time? Are they gonna do the whole district at the same time? Are they gonna do building to building? And what is the timeline for receiving that information? I know when I listened to the preview, this is a year ago, they said, you know, it'll only take a few months. But I kind of wanted to know a little bit more detail of how their schedule is gonna come back to us. Because we could digest it as a board
It's in the,
if we get.
it's in that memo.
Yeah, it's gonna be in the
That's- I
spring.
just wanna make sure.
So they're gonna get to work on that this month. They're doing a little pre-work, before like the September 19th meeting that will be with, district leaders. And we've got to firm up details on that. And then they'll start meeting with custodians, building principals, with Mike. And then what's gonna happen, it's a lot of data collection, and then they put together the reports. And then that'll be presented for the Board of Education with the target of March. And then, you know, we've just had small discussions with no firm, you know, plans yet, but like ways that we can, you know, inform the community about what the needs are. And start a facilities committee like is on the strategic plan. So really, there's a lot more to come, but this is a really major first step that we need to get.
I'm just excited.
Yeah.
I'll go around here, Tony.
Thanks, guys, for putting this together. I'm just curious, do you guys think that we could utilize a dink and dunk approach to taking care of all the building needs long-term?
What is that?
What do you mean?
Well, I'm just looking at, you know, we're just kind of doing like, you know, $900,000, $1 million worth a year in projects. Is that a realistic, or do you have enough information at this point before that assessment? Do you have any pulse on that, or are we gonna know more after the assessment?
We'll know a lot more after the assessment. Just from my getting to know the buildings, you
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to maintain the buildings with that dink and dunk approach. A week and a half ago, I had the phone call that Stangl School water main broke on it. So we were able to get Lucier Plumbing over there. They took care of it right away. Well, that Saturday morning, Jim got the phone call, and then he called me. He said, water main broke again,
At the same place?
that far away.
Oh, God,
So,
man.
so I was just hoping all weekend, I'm like, oh, this is a bad pipe section. So, I mean, everybody, the excavator and everybody said, we need to replace that. Even our plumber said, we need to replace that line all the way out to the street. I said, I'm not going to do that, not with this, waiting for this facility study. We will replace that first 20 feet because that seems to be that bad pipe section. And it's weak and it's corroded and all of that. It's 55 years old now. So anyway, but I mean, there's two costs that came up. Didn't expect it at all. And now we're going to dig it out, and it'll be on a weekend, so we're not disrupting the students at all when we finally make that final change out, because we have to get into the building on that one to change it out. So anyway, it's several $1,000s again. Is there gonna be another school with a break like that? So those are costs that have to be, and I don't know, cause I am so new, I don't know what that bunch of money
High
looks
school,
like.
it's 100 years
Right.
old.
What we'll be facing, so, but no, we wouldn't be able to maintain the buildings on that.
Right, yeah, that's what I was getting at, is I think at some point, we're gonna have to look at a larger, and that's, I guess, why we're doing this, but at some point, I don't know if we can really do what we need to do without a larger referendum, right? I mean, if we're gonna have an honest conversation about it.
And I think that's why when we talk about next week and what we can levy now, what we might have to levy in the future, what that's gonna look like, our facilities have to be part of that game plan. Sure, for sure.
I have to say, it's been a pleasure working with Mike to, bring him up to speed on some of the budget stuff. He's been very willing to learn and absorb it. It's a lot to grasp in a short amount of time, and then wanting to make, he's jumped in and to try to take an active approach and start making progress on this work, which is nice. The additional referendum monies also helps, so it's been great working together, and it's nice to see already some progress on things that have needed to be done, so it's
I just don't know how far I can go all the time, so I have to be careful with that.
great. So Angelo, can I?
Matthew?
I was, you know what, I think my question will be answered with the assessment that's coming up, but I know that this is not a complete list, but it is some of the things that we were looking at primarily, but I do know that, I was just gonna ask if Washington's gym is on this list in the next 5 years. I mean, that gym is,
Will be, won't it?
it will be after the assessment, I'm assuming, cause I mean, I know they measured it not too long ago, they put tape on that thing just to see how long it would dry, it's dropping like 1/4 of an inch a year.
The first time that I looked at it, I just saw that part by the south door, and I thought, well, that's just sagging, but it's all over the place.
Yeah, the entire place is cracking and falling into the
The
ground.
foundation
Yeah.
is holding fairly well. It's everything on the inside. It's
Right.
like, they didn't get the right
I just
compaction.
worry about if that's a safety issue or not, and I know that this is obviously some main things we wanna worry about, but I understand that once the assessment comes through, we'll probably have more information.
Yep. One other thing I just wanted to note was lighting. We started that with Hubbard Electric to do our assessment on district-wide lighting for LED, because it looks like we can save a substantial amount on our electric bill. And just nothing is done anywhere, so we're working on that also.
Okay. Good.
And the only last thing I wanted to say, I think, this project is gonna be, and I think making some hard decisions about, when we talked about, or you had brought up about, the academic, this company's, the instructional needs, that's our priority, right? And so we really need to look at, I've heard from teachers that the way teaching is done now and the structures that we have in place are obsolete. So what we really need to be thinking about, because we also don't want to throw good money after bad, right? So we don't want to keep fixing things, patching things, to keep a structure that is not sustainable. So I think that just leads into, you had talked about rumors about, selling schools.
Yeah, right.
I don't think, we don't want to be part of rumors, but we also all need to be very aware that we're gonna have to make some hard decisions in the future with what we do, so we can make it sustainable. I think now is the time to say, we can't keep doing things how we have been, and not set ourselves up for the future to continually be managing what we do have. And that the driving force of that being academic achievement and what's going to be best for our students to learn and to have the correct stuff for our teachers and our students. So that has to be at the forefront. It has to be, instead of just saying, we need to fix this roof. So I appreciate that is going to be a component of it, because I think that's what has to drive this discussion, just my opinion.
I think the assessment will help in that.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. I help.
And Angela, anytime you can have Mike slip something else on this list, Sure we all love it.
Oh, yeah, this copy.
Okay, so then I want to move into, we have some instructional policy review and discussion. We have several policies here, a lot of them overlap. And Director Tennis is going to,
Going to hand you fresh copies of the 4 policies. So there's a number of policies within our policy books that just require updating from time to time. Sure. Yep. And so we discussed sort of how to do that. We have a whole, stack of them.
right,
So the approach we're taking here is to try to bring you several policies at a time that are sort of related, or at least closely related enough. And so I just kind of want to go over those with you and the process, and then get your feedback on how we want to do this. So the 4 policies that you have in front of you, I had also sent a memo from our office, just letting you know kind of what we're doing here in terms of our thinking. So these 4 policies, 3 of them have to do with basically enrollment or eligibility to come to school here. And 1 is just what constitutes a full-time student. Process-wise, the board usually takes these policies up with so introduction is sort of tonight. Then you have a first reading, which we can do it next week, and then a second reading, in which can take place in the board meeting following, where you can make amendments, revisions, discussions on any of these during those times on the agenda. And then following the second reading, really you can pass the policy and approve it into action. So I guess my question for you is, we have several policies. Would you prefer a cycle in which you get the policies, then you have your first reading, second reading, and we wait to bring new ones? Or do you want to start bringing new ones also, where that would be introduced, for example? We could bring a few more to introduce next week, but I just don't know how much you want to bog down, your agenda with the policies. We can easily wait till the 3 meeting cycle is over and then bring in a new set, or we can bring in, a set of 3 or 4.
Depends on how big a set is.
We can do, we can keep it manageable with 3 or 4.
Yeah.
But I guess that's one question I just have for the board in terms of what is your desire? Do you want to take them through the full cycle and then bring in new ones? Or do you want to start overlapping a little bit?
well, my preference would be, just because, when I look at this governance structure, that, I want to highlight a little bit at the end, is tonight's meeting really follows that structure that I'm looking to do, which means that it's a working meeting where we have these types of things on the agenda. So I think that it should be rolling, because the waiting for all these documents to come again in 3 weeks to start the whole process over, especially when the one is the introduction, saying, hey, these are the ones to look at, become familiar with them.
Yeah.
My preference would be as we get to work on them, because that's what this time would be used for.
Sure.
Another question here is, we can do that in just the special meetings, but we could also introduce something at a regular meeting too. Just because of how many we have, we're trying to space this, and the rolling is really going to help.
Yeah.
But do we introduce it just at the specials? And then start doing a first reading, second reading, but you could also, do a preview, not even a first reading, just an orientation. But I'd like to keep your regular meetings concise and actionable.
I think the introductions could take place at any time you wanted to.
And then,
Yeah, just a quick suggestion. I mean, I'm open to whatever, but just when we get these policies, what would be helpful for me is, if we can get a marked up copy that's got the changes in red.
Yeah,
It just,
I like
it's
that. Yeah, I
really
like
hard
that
for me to
idea.
go back and forth. And I just want to kind of capture,
Yeah.
how is the new version different?
Different from the old version?
Black.
Sure.
That would expedite it. but-
Okay.
like a
Can-
red
can I-
line.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I also offer some clarification here, because you're so far behind in policies? You could have a policy that's on the books. You could have had 2 revisions, and now you got a third revision that Neola is proposing. And Neola works off of their template, which is typically your last that you have on the books. Okay, so what's hard here is we could get into a lot of manual.
Yeah.
You see, because really what would happen, what there would be typically given us if we are current, with a few exceptions, for example, controversial topics, issues. That one you kind of made unique. So Neola doesn't own that. You own that more and are more responsible for maintaining it. A lot of the policies in Neola are only almost going to be vanilla. You're saying, I totally agree. It's legal
So-
and there's options. And so I'm just saying.
So to clarify, we have 2014 and we're going to 2023, let's just say, okay?
Okay.
But we're using 2014, but they changed it 2017, 2018, 2020. And so what you're asking for is to redline all of that
Right.
instead of,
So,
because we haven't seen, do you know what I'm saying?
so what we did, and that's
Pretty hard.
because of that difficulty, what we did is we gave you the current policy on the books.
Yeah.
And then with these documents that I gave you, these are the choices that you basically have. So a lot of the things are really set in stone because of statutes and things that they're following in terms of the policy making, which will bring us up to date and current, which is great. But there are several things in each of these policies in which you have to make decisions on. And so, you know, our team goes through the policies, puts the check mark on our recommendation, that those be the check mark things. But of course, that's through your review of the policy, your questions, and then ultimately your final decision as to how you want to move forward with the policy.
Let me
So-
add another consideration, for your, it goes by just what we're talking about, put on the table right now. What you just asked, Tony, assumes that what you had in place was good. So you want to look from what you had that was good to what now is being proposed. But what you have on the place may not be good.
Yeah.
You could avoid even making a comparison what you have on the books as though you don't have policy at all and just say, does this now make sense?
Yeah.
What they're presenting to us.
Yeah, I guess we could do that for sure.
So you don't even go back to what you have on the books, you just try to become current as fast as you can. How does it make sense?
How prevalent is that in our policies? I mean, is that most of them that are, we just like?
We're 2 to 3 years behind in keeping our policies current.
So is that gonna be most of the policies we look at, or you?
I think there could be a lot of them, here would be my recommendation.
Yeah.
Is I would only go with what's being proposed, I wouldn't make, and I would leave it to us to surface if we had something unique, that we established.
So that when we read
So that,
this,
then we would say, 5 years ago when you did this, you varied from Neola, to make it unique to Manitowoc. It's just like the one we gave as an example. So I would say, put that burden on us. Now, this is your decision. It's just something for your consideration. I'd actually recommend it because it'd help expedite the process. And now your attention is to, does this policy make sense? Do we even want it? Do we have to have it? And so that would that's, because otherwise what you're doing, if you really want to do that thoroughly, you have to say, was the policy on the books good?
Right, and that's what I was trying to
Yeah.
get to, is a more efficient way. I get that we're behind, and I get that we need to catch up, but what was difficult when I read through these, I read through one, and then I read through the other one, and I'm like, what did I just read? You know what I mean? It was like.
That's what I'm saying. I think it's overly complicated, to do that.
Yeah.
Whereas the important thing is this policy, let's just say you didn't have policies and you're going to Neola for the first time and you're now getting all these. You would be looking at them saying, does this make sense for us to adopt it?
But we need to make you need to make
What's the
specific
change?
decisions on the check start.
Right.
I want to highlight that.
hang on one second, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say that, back to the original question.
Yeah.
Because then we kind of got veered off, is that to whether or not we wanted this a continuing rolling thing, and I believe he highlighted it several times, so did Stacy, that we're so far behind. I know that we've given a okay effort so far in redoing, or, updating policies, you know, in the last year or so, but we haven't done anything for so many years in the past that I think it would be, I don't care how you bring it to us. I just think it would be, whether it's a regular meeting, special meeting, every single meeting, I think we should be having an introduction.
Okay.
We should be doing the first reading on the other ones, the second reading on the other ones. We need to continue because it's gonna benefit us when we get to the point of being up to date with wherever Neola is.
Right.
You know what I mean? So we could take them as they're coming in. That's just my opinion. But that was back to the original question, now we can go back.
Yeah.
I'm all for expediting, however, I don't wanna be ostracized for when somebody has a point that they wanna bring up, because you're like an outlier then, because you're not going along with the group, because you're pushing the policy through. And if you have a reference to where we came from, it gives you a good foundation to have precedence of why it was that way. So I completely understand, however, maybe we do a hybrid or something. But for Mr. Tennis's point of view, maybe we have the old one available to us, but we keep moving forward with the 2023 version. So like, I understand your point of view, however, you get ostracized real quickly when you bog down a meeting because you say, hey, this is how we've been doing it, just because it might be wrong or different. But when you stop a meeting and say, hey, I'd like to change it, or I'd like to keep it closer to where it was, then
Well,
you get outed because you're like, well, you have no reference. You say, well, you're using the old
Yeah,
policy.
sure.
So
That's good.
that's, we can't throw the Constitution away, that's what I'm saying.
No,
It's still a working
a couple
document.
things just to think. You always can look
I
at
know.
what's on the books. All you gotta do is go to your section, pull up the policy,
Yeah.
and you can see it. It's whether or not we do all this red marking.
Correct.
And is there a return on that for you?
Yes.
Because that, you know, we could take 2 years to finish this, or we could do it in a year or less.
Yep.
That's what I was gonna ask you. How long would it take to get through this? You think it'd be about a year to update everything?
Well, rolling it is, but you know, we're just talking about the instructional side that we're going into, and these are only ones that have been proposed.
I would say within a few months, if we roll it, we can be through the
Then
instructional side.
We got the other ones, we got facilities, we've got HR, we've got, you know, some of these will repeat themselves because sometimes if it's something that has to do with, equal rights, you're gonna find that in everything that has to do with both students and staff sometimes, you know, and you're gonna see in multiple policies where the change is going to be similar through 4 or 5 policies.
I think we should fast track it. We need to get caught up on that. There's no excuse to be as far behind as we are. And if that means an extra special meeting every month, whatever, let's just do it.
Can you get us just a PDF copy of what we're on now?
It's
in your board.
It's, okay, so then we have that.
Yeah, so I think that we've decided that. I think the next piece really is, you know, as you go through the policies after introduction, and if you're running into anything where like you have questions or you just need a clarification on something, or you're, you know, confused about the check mark we made and why didn't we make it there, just reach out too also, and I can answer those questions for you individually even, so that when we do come to the meetings, it'll really be about your policy decisions as a board.
But so most of the changes are to keep us compatible with the, you know, the legislative environment that we're in, right? So there's not much choice really, is there? I mean,
I mean, a lot of these are statutorily required.
yeah.
But there are choices we have within each that we can decide.
I guess that's, I mean, what is Neola? It's the organization that
Yeah,
tries to keep
yeah.
us following the statutes, following the law, blah, blah, blah. So most of what's in here is gonna be legally probably what schools have to do.
Correct.
So whether it was 2014 or 2023,
We gotta be compatible with it.
Right.
We gotta
But-
be in compliance, yeah.
you know, it would be interesting to see what has changed that dramatically. But the other thing is, it should be stuff that we are going, yeah, we have to follow that. So I would go ahead and I would have no problem introducing more.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Not that you get it done quick, but at least we see it.
I like the way that Jim says about, imagine this is our first go through and our attorney who is a Neola and knows the policies has looked at this and said, you need to have one of these.
Yeah.
And that we look at this and we say, cause again, just because Neola says we have to have it, we don't. I mean, you could write your own policies if you wanted to. But there are certain things though have to be in them. But again, if you read something and you're like, this doesn't sound like Manitowoc, or I think we should do 3 classes if the board determines sufficient space, right? So even though it's not a suggestion, we can still do that. So I think that if everyone's in agreement, I think that's the way we should proceed. We get the one that they're recommending. And we have the other one in for reference, if we want to go back and look, if there's something that just doesn't seem like it makes sense, or what were we doing before, if it was a huge change. Usually they put in there if they've made a substantial change too, I think.
And I did look at that when I reviewed the old ones with the new ones, and there are a few things, for example, even in the first, the first policy, you have A through like Z, right?
Yeah, right.
And so D this time is something slightly different. They may change some of the wording, or perhaps there was a statute that went off the books and a new one came on or something like that, but it's all pretty straightforward. And I agree with you in terms of what Jim had mentioned. I just read it through first to see if it made sense, and it was easier to do that than trying to go back and forth on the policies.
Let me just add one more thing, and it's more for you to be thinking about when you start putting things in policy. In one of my previous school districts, I bid out a fixed price contract, and only one of the top law firms in Michigan bid on it, and they got award, and I saved $100,000 on legal. They said you shouldn't be putting all the law into the policies because you're adding to the law in your policy. And you are making you're making it more complicated, and you're gonna be held responsible because what you're approving now becomes law in terms of that, with the exception of not violating law, you are now putting additional conditions that you're gonna be held accountable for. So just think about that when you're going through these policies too.
And that we pay good money, a lot of money for Neola to do this for us. So I think that there has to be that element of trust, that we look at this document, we say, is there anything in here beyond what the check marks would be that we want to change? Because we think we want to do something different, and if not, then we look at the things that we have options for and move on. Does that sound okay?
We can get to the policy when we get to the policy.
What was that?
I disagree with that because just because the policy is written, we don't just accept that that we can't change words, that we want to change as a district because we're a collective of this community and we have different morals and values.
Sure.
So I understand there's legislative requirements. However, sometimes it's about what we want as a community. How many credits do we want for graduation? Not the legislative stuff. I'm saying as a community, we have input and we can't just rubber stamp stuff. So but I'm not gonna just, as long as I'm on the board, I'm not gonna just rubber stamp stuff because I'm here. We're gonna dive into it as we need. So there's both hands, but it's gonna take time, and I understand.
If I could add to what Matt is
Sure.
saying, because Matt makes a critical point here and something to think about. The Department of Public Instruction might put something in procedures, Neola might regurgitate it back out to a policy, and yet you might want to be writing to the Department of Public Instruction or the legislators that you do not support this. You will comply with the law, but you don't support it and you're advocating for a change. Typically, you have that opportunity. So it is important to really understand in terms of what makes sense to you and what does local control mean. Just so it is a good point, and I only highlight in terms of to really look at stuff relative to this community, local control, but also compliance with the law.
And I wasn't suggesting that we do anything different.
I just, we can't just trust somebody else to do our jobs. That's how we got in the position we're in.
I didn't like that word.
So that's what I got out of that statement. So I'm not yelling it, I'm just saying like, we have to be our own advocates for our own community, and that's why we need to get everybody re-involved. And school board meetings shouldn't be boring, because they're your children in the community, and they're your future. So I don't like that sentiment that we're just gonna push things through because it's up to date, because Neola said it was okay.
No,
Well-
absolutely. We're definitely got a lot of work to do along the way. We
But
gotta
I
make
understand
sure
the
that-
expediting of it, I get it. So I think a rolling is awesome. I think we dive into them, but we don't get ostracized if we have questions, and if we have to table it, we table it. And then we just bring it back the next meeting, and it keeps on moving forward, and we keep.
Absolutely.
No hills to die on this stuff, though, is there?
I don't think so.
I think that's a great point, but I think the other end of that was the point of the conversation was that we are just way behind. And we have to
Yeah,
be
I
caught up,
understand.
so that's really, no one wants to rush through it, but we just want to be efficient.
And some may take longer than others.
Correct.
Let's, well, I mean, I think all the discussion has been good, but I think we need to take them a policy at a time. And if somebody gets, ripped off or, upset about something, then we give it additional attention. But honestly, this stuff is pretty boilerplate stuff.
Yeah, some of them will be, okay. All right, so, so these are the ones that we're gonna be working with. And do you wanna go through the,
So I mean, I can just provide just a general overview
That'd
of
be
each
great.
of the policies, and then you can take and look them over, and if you have, like I said, specific questions that, you'd like us to answer in between our meetings too, we totally can do that for you.
Can I just with that point, because this is one thing that President Stacy has asked about. Whenever you give us questions in advance, it makes it more efficient. And the other practice that I've done in the past, if I get a question from a board member, I typically share it with all board members. So that everybody's informed because somebody raised something that was good. So it helps us because it will help move things on, because you're already giving us information that we need to have answers or some explanation of. So I just really encourage you to do that.
So the first policy up is eligibility of resident, non-resident students. The purpose of this policy is to determine the eligibility of students really to attend the MTSD. So we're talking about like residency, we're talking about students who may live in our town but go to, let's say Ron Colley, but they want to take a couple of classes at Lincoln. They can totally do that because it's in our policy. And we've had students take advantage of those types of things in the past. You'll see some other things in here. For example, students who begin a school year as a resident and then leave have the option to stay. And then the choice ones in this one come under option or letter R, where we're talking about receiving this student potentially who was expelled from another school district that's a public school district in the state of Wisconsin. And as you'll see there, as we've typically done, we empower the district administrator to review those students to decide whether or not we enroll them in Manitowoc. So those are the choices you have on that one in terms of, what Neola creates as choices. And then, of course, obviously, whatever your pleasure would be in regards to the policy. But that's a general overview of that policy.
How about B? B is like a little, kind of at first read, it's kind of fundamentally different. But I guess what it does is it says, well, these aren't issues that we can't deal with illegal aliens or homeless as an issue when, just as that's off the table. Yeah, okay.
we can't touch that.
So it does do what P in the original thing does. Is it-
Correct, it just, yep. it works.
Okay, good.
Yep. The next policy, 5113, is really about our open enrollment program. And Angela was just going to take you through that one since her office kind of runs the open enrollment process.
Yes, and there are just certain rules that we have to follow under the Wisconsin State Statute. If you look at number 3 on the second page, under annual space determinations. As you'll remember, every January, the board takes up the sort of limits and the allowable amounts for special education students as an example. So we set those amounts to sort of protect our overall exposure financially. Sometimes we'll have students attend our school district and then from another district, but they have high class, very, very high class needs. And so in that case, then we are able to turn them back over to their home district for them to take on that responsibility of educating them. So, so that's just one main thing that we do. And we also, to take on to what Lee had mentioned about the other policy, is that whenever we have a student request to open enroll into our district, and we get this on a, I shouldn't say daily basis, but anytime someone requests to go to another district, we'll get a contact that says, can you send any of the, can't think of the word right now, any of the behavioral concerns or IEP information so that they can understand if there has been something they need to be aware of and protect themselves as a district. So it's all very standard practice. So that's just the main thing that you want to be aware of on that point on the second page. And then there are some, we do have, like, once we allow students, and that's for open enrolling, if people want to, if students want to come into our district. Once we accept them into our district, and if there are no causes for concerns with open enrollment, when they go in, when they make the change from elementary to middle and middle to high school, we have them go through the process again, but it's more of an internal process because we need to know which middle school or high school, which middle school they're going to, and then high school as well, since we have the McKinley Academy and Lincoln High School as well. So we often will have students that attend on waivers also, and so let's say someone is attending during the year and they are not a resident of our district anymore, but they're allowed to stay for the rest of the year, then they need to re-enroll the next year, and that's for the same reason, to catch if they have special education needs that we can meet, and also so that we can know that we can meet their needs, or if they need to be returned and receive education from their homes or the resident school district. And we have letters and processes in place in the office that Amber Kipe, who handles all of our open enrollment, that she just has a system and process for this that she takes care of. So we meet all the state requirements, and there's a system where they enter everything into as well.
Can I clarify what the check mark differences are on some of these? Does that mean where the changes are happening, or?
These are just all the choices available. So really, I think compared to, and Lee and I were talking about this, we had originally considered if you go back to the second page under number point A, number 3, selecting in the draft, we had in board books that all currently attending students, and I just had brought up just for some clarity, the fact that we have this process with our special education limits and for the alternative enrollment and the waivers, just to make sure that we kind of protect ourselves in that way, instead of, we say all currently attending students. So let's say something happens where they're from an outside district, they develop severe needs that we can't meet, and then we have the ability to consider if we're able to keep them as a student.
Yeah, that was kind of, is something in addition, there's an extra check mark, so that was just adding.
Correct. So
That's why I wanted to know, because there's some that were completely different, you know what I mean? Like one of the ones was whether or not to enroll a student that has been expelled from a different district prior to, it said all requests received by the student that has been expelled from another Wisconsin public school district must be brought before the board to approve or deny. And then this one is the district administrator may choose to enroll another. So I was just kind of wondering, are we changing it, or is this, like, is it being added, or how?
Those are just the options that.
How am I looking at that?
So
The check
look
mark.
at it from the sense of what we're checking is the recommendation of the administrator.
And it's on the revision.
Yeah.
Yep, that's why you get these pages, is what it'll do is it'll give you those statutory, like, as you were looking at before in this policy and the other ones, it's the A, B, C. There's not like choices to make in terms of the policies that Neola has created. But with this one in particular, there are several options that the board could choose to do. What we're trying to do as a team is review these ahead of time, make the recommendations to you of what we think is in the best interest of the district. And then it'll be, your job to kind of go in and say, yeah, well, I mean, it would, using the district, just as a good example, using the district administrator to decide whether or not someone who's been expelled, that's what we're suggesting would be Jim's call. If you want those to go in front of the board, that's an option.
Well, it looks like on here that it was that way, and now it's changing. All request Because this one's checked on the revised, and all request enrolled and received, that it would be brought before us, and I'm like, I don't think that should be.
No,
That's why we're recommending.
right.
Well, this is on the revised, and on the one that you handed to me, which, that one it was.
The one that you got handed to you is the most current recommendation.
Oh, okay.
That one
We hadn't sat down and reviewed that.
together, which we did today. So that's why we got this. So what,
Work, and that when
Yep.
that came together.
and what you'll
What I'm
see
looking at is under suggested revisions.
on the computer version? Yeah. So what you'll see with this hard copy is that after tonight, after the introduction, this will be replaced as the PDF in board book as the actual recommendation.
So I did not have a chance to sit down and review it. As we sat down and reviewed it, that was our conclusion. in
I was
terms
just
of what
looking
we
at,
did.
I see is a bunch more extra meetings just to approve somebody that's been, and that should be your decision in my.
Well, and that's what we thought. I mean, that's why we were recommending that.
Okay.
That's why we had changed it from what was originally, our first draft of this. We hadn't sat down and discussed it. And we
Okay.
said, we're trying to become more efficient. The board is looking for us to do our job, and we think that this is in our court.
That's why I wanted to check, because I wanted to be able to verify as to what we're looking at as far as changes, and I was probably looking at it backwards, and that's why it was confusing. Okay, I got you.
So maybe in the future, if you guys haven't had a chance to meet, put it in there blank,
Yeah,
right?
rather than, until we have the recommendation.
Correct.
Got it.
Correct.
Yep.
Is that all, Angela?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So then the next one is 5113.01, which is actually also an open enrollment, or part-time open enrollment, which is basically just, sometimes school districts have agreements with each other to allow students to take some classes from each other. Really just as kind of a, yep, okay, this kid's really, been active in autos, let's say. So we have an advanced autos class that sometimes meets at Lincoln. That student could go there, but one of our students could go to an ag class, for example, that they may have had. Up to 2 classes, again, gives the board a ton of autonomy in terms of, you can say no if you, for several reasons. One could be that we have no room in the course, and it actually does specify in this policy that, preference is always given to our resident students. However, on the other side of that coin, it also, if you'll notice under the B section of that, is undue financial burden. So if the district ever felt that, this was an undue financial burden, and at this time we don't want to do this, they don't have to. The other thing you'll notice with this one is it's pretty rare because it does require 6 weeks of written notice to you to even grant this as a possibility. So I don't remember as a principal ever having this process go in front of the board. It was possible as a result of having the policy the way it is written.
Sorry,
Okay.
Mr. Tennis,
Yeah.
interrupt you. Can we go back to 5113? I had one comment, concern that I wanted to talk about quickly with letter E, transportation. So what you just said about, academic side of it, what about transportation? I would see no bearing to have a problem if Valders wanted to pick up a student that was in our area, because the student's parents weren't happy with what we were doing. I would be okay with the district administrator developing procedures for implementing the transportation of that student to Valders. So I would like to talk about option 1 being a viable choice for the Board of Education. Does everybody understand?
Yeah, I don't see why we should restrict another district from.
And I understand, well, I want to talk about it, is what I want to talk.
And I think that's in place to a degree at this time.
Is it? Then why isn't it an option?
It is an old arrangement. I know Valders buses comes in and buses some of our
Then
students.
let's check option 1.
So that's just kind of been that wasn't
Thank
an
you, for
agreement
because,
with the.
because there's a big call in Newton, on the south side, Union Road, completely, if you live on one side of the road on Union, you have to go to Valders and Manitowoc, and that
It's
creates
in that very
division between
area.
friends. That's one, and then Cassuth has another issue as well. So I'm just saying, like, if we're gonna lay it out there, why don't we permit, their buses to pick up our children, which we said that we already have a precedent.
There's sort of a
Well, I'd like to. permit-
grandfather gentleman's agreement, if you could call it that, and there's, I think in some cases, it's kind of like, yeah, you know, it's, that's not a big deal. That's kind of how it was looked at in the past.
Well, I remember you had to walk across the street and go to that certain bar down the corner to get picked up. I'm not kidding either, just so you guys know. And you had to get picked up there. You couldn't get picked up at your house. So I would be more apt to check option one. And you can please explain why we would.
Just clarification, in one of my previous districts, one district was experiencing declining enrollment. They got very aggressive and were marketing, ready to come in any place of our school district to get our students, okay? You might recall that Sheboygan was advertising for teachers on our billboards. So there is the good neighborly, and then there is the competitive neighbor who is looking to eat your lunch. Just to think about, you know, as you look and reflect on this.
Yeah, you're right, 100%. Competitiveness, you know, and then what do we call it? Poaching, that's what we would call it. That's a factor. Yeah, I was just coming from the standpoint of parents and being a student in the district where.
It's almost like, you know, the thing where fences make good neighbors.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, so there are different ways to look at it. It's, you know, looking at the trade-offs, because you're right. Who wouldn't want to work out a mutual arrangement that's beneficial?
Is there a way to write it that would not be black or white, and that would incorporate?
You can do anything you want.
Not poaching, but it would also incorporate those situations where,
Matt was talking about.
correct.
If you pick option one.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, but if we didn't check that box and Manitowoc wanted to enter an agreement with another district, we certainly could do that independently as well,
Yeah, I get your angle.
right?
Right. That's right. I mean, you can do whatever you want to do. NOLA is trying to help you with some parameters and what to think and what other people are thinking about.
Our buses come in their district either.
Right.
They don't want our buses coming in their
No.
district either.
Right. So, I mean, it's,
Yeah, but it just gets into a twisted area where with what Matt's talking about at bordering the
common
streets where
sense.
The
it's.
farm family on the.
It's just an inconvenience.
That they have to move their kid just because they wanted to go to Sheboygan because they were happier.
Right.
And now they have to drop their kid off at that station because the bus doesn't come
Sure.
over. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
And I
when we're
understand.
inner city.
Coaching, but I'm just saying, like, financial burden, I get it, so I mean, but I'm just telling you a real life example, and Angela verified it for me, so.
you know, if
Not making this up.
you, just as an example, when we've already referenced some other school districts because it was helping us to understand success for all. But that Ohio school is a big choice school. Because they're so outperforming, people want to go there. You can imagine their neighbors are trying to figure out how to stop that and keep those students in.
Yeah, sure.
One of the best things, obviously, always, the better you are, the more likely people are going to want you.
Only if we could school the fish, we'd be better. That's how I always say that, you know, because you don't have any yeast exposure. Except for
But
water.
If we do two though,
We do.
it says will not permit, it's pretty strong. That would preclude or outlaw Angela's grandfather clause, wouldn't it?
So just clarification, you know, you can insert something that's not there. You can write it so that it serves us. Like you might give discretion to the superintendent.
Okay, but we'd have to say that.
So why wouldn't we pick a third option that would give the discretion of the district administrator?
That's what I'm saying. I'm just trying to stimulate, we can, if there's consensus here, we can get the language to fit our needs.
Sure.
Yeah,
Couldn't we talked about?
you can choose whether to keep the door wide open or to have a process.
Yeah, that's what we got.
So would
These two
you,
options.
so it sounds like, I mean, nobody would be probably opposed to that. So would you guys be willing to wordsmith something together that would,
On option two, yeah.
yeah, another option?
We'll add that to next week's meeting.
Correct.
Yep, Smith, I like that.
Sorry.
That's a good point.
I would have never thought that.
And we wouldn't because we were not in those situations, but he knows about it. I mean, going to the district.
Going to the bar between the strip club and
Right? Hey, that's horrible. It's a horrible situation.
Can't make this Lee, we can wordsmith it, but if the other district doesn't like our wordsmithing, maybe it would be better to try to make it that gentleman's agreement between Supes to say, you know, if, let's say it's Valders and they run their bus company and they want to pick up the kid across the street, why could the super of Manitowoc and Valders say, yeah, that's okay?
Right, that's.
And going the other way, rather than if we wordsmith it and Valders says, forget this.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, this is sort of
Better to have that gentleman's agreement that we had in the past.
Yeah, it would be.
And then trying to write that, and then you have to deal with a new super each time they come in. I don't know. I'm just saying that
Here's some.
we could write it perfectly and they'll say, forget this, we're not.
Here's sometimes how the unexpected happens. And this happened, you have school boundaries. Sometimes people don't know where they are. Somebody comes in and develops a subdivision. And this one cul-de-sac is in another school district. The rest is in one school district because it's built right on the boundary and overlaps just a little bit. Superintendents got together and said, doesn't make sense for us to be taking those kids.
But this
There's
is.
gotta be a way we can get together with neighboring districts and figure out a wordsmith or whatever, like you said, or some sort of an agreement.
Well, just bring us some options.
Yep, I'll just put, I'll develop a phrase to what you're looking for to add there as an option, and then the board can decide at that point. Okay.
Do we have, on that note,
Deals on the side.
I'm just curious, just kind of to help me assess which option I would want to pick, but do we have any visibility on that, just the balance of like students opting out from our district to that district, to our neighboring districts and vice versa? Like, is there any,
Numbers?
is there any data we have on that?
The choice?
Yeah, I'm just curious, like, are there kids from Valdez that come
Specifically
here,
on the
or,
lines.
and vice versa? Like, I'm sure there's
Sure,
something
we have,
opt out.
we
There's
definitely have
always
that.
gonna be a mixture of that because there are family ties to districts, or like if special programs, like Valders offers FFA where we don't offer that, like where we offer a nice autos program and we bring students in from districts at times. So you're never gonna be able to tie it out exactly and say, this is the reason why these people come. I mean, we're gonna be surveying them to get that data. But it's not, there is some open enrollment that comes from that agreement specifically, I know, and that's just.
I would only want the board to recognize you're gonna create a problem, because as we become a destination point, more people are gonna wanna come here, so your neighbors might not be happy with you.
Understand.
And in some cases, whether they bus them or not, the parents, if they really want this kids to go to that district, would find a way to make it happen. That's the reality to a degree. Sometimes the busing makes it easier. I think in this case, it's not like a bus full of children that are picked up. I think it's a small handful, so.
Yeah.
We good on that one?
Yep.
5113? Okay, so then back to just, I believe I was sort of going through. 5113.01. And as I was just explaining, this is a very rare occurrence for a lot of these things, but there's protections in place for you as a district to say no, but it lays it out pretty clearly what a student, both one of our resident students who may want to take something like the FFA, or one of their students a non-resident student that would like to. So that's what this policy is all about. And you'll be able to see what those options are in here, which are just a couple, with the non-resident piece. Is there anything else on this policy? For now? Okay. And then the last one is the full-time student policy, which really just defines for our district what it means to be a full-time student. And any student in a board-approved program, any student enrolled in 6 or more classes a day in 6 through 12. And then there are some exceptions, which are some programs in the district. If a student, for example, is in an early college credit program, like our Rising Phoenix program, for example, where they take a majority of their coursework at UWGB, they're still considered our student full-time. And you'll see some other things in there with perhaps some programmatic things with students with IEPs, or other types of modified programs if there were some students that had to have some, medical things or other things that the district could accommodate. So it gives some room for, to make it work, I guess you'd say, for folks. And those are the four for this time. So just so that I'm clear, I will come back next week with some other ones to add to an introduction phase. This one will be in phase of first reading, which means we can mark them up or do whatever you'd like to do.
And we're gonna recommend, based on our discussion here,
Yep.
we're gonna adjust some of our recommendation here too, because we're agreeing with the conversation. And again, that doesn't.
We'll have those
stop
updated.
First reading to make changes before a second or table it.
Yep.
I mean, all those things are always open.
Correct.
And then I would just say, if there is anything that comes up that you have a question about, or, shoot it off to one of the directors or Jim, just so, they can be prepared to answer that when they next time.
Okay.
Okay, thank you guys for that work. Appreciate it. It's a good start. All right, well, the last thing you got kind of a dry run of what I sort of anticipate are, they're not gonna be called committee to hold, it's gonna be a special meeting like it was today. But this is what we would do is we would spend our time working on the things that we need to out of committee. We would get updates on certain things, make, decisions about things that come to us, and we would keep our, I'd like to start keeping our meetings, I'd like to keep our meetings shorter than they typically are. I think that once we're able to, condense some of these things down and get a rolling strategy going, I think that it'll be effective. So how does that feel to everybody to have a list of items like this, like today? That would be, we're not gonna call them committees, but that's where we would do our committee work, would be in these working sessions. So, I'm hoping that we can keep our, typical business that we have pretty light, the things that we have to pass and do, like personnel reports, things like that, so that we can have a working session, but that we would predominantly do our 2 meetings that we would have a month. And that's where we would do our work on these items that would come up as committee items. The other thing, when you think about topics, so for instance, remember that each one of you can add something to an agenda at any time. Jim and I sit down and talk about those typically on Wednesday, but we don't publish it until Friday, as you know. So if there's something, in there that you want considered, because I know, Carrie last time said, I don't know where else to bring this up because it's not on the agenda. So if there is something that comes up, forward those things, and, we'll fit it into the agenda where it goes. But really, I want I really want our strategic plan. So when you think about those 5 pillars, those are the things that we should be discussing and driving. And so, if we had committees, our work should be around those 5 items. And so, be thinking about, that's where we wanna stick things and make sure we're not getting off track, trying to, micromanage, or, we hired all these people to do their job, so let's try to be big picture, get the things done that we need to, but know that you can bring those, things forward, and I certainly put them on the agenda. Okay? How's that sound?
I guess.
Try it?
I completely disagree, but you know my feelings on it. I think this is a good example of taking 20 minutes to talk about an issue that perhaps in a committee could have been hashed out, brought to this group, and it would have been, here are the strengths and weaknesses, let's talk and vote on it. And as I said at other meetings, I've been here a while now, and a lot of stuff just hasn't been on that agenda, hasn't been addressed. And I think you get that in committees because you get experts who know or work long enough on finance or personnel or whatever to make those decisions rather than this. So not in favor of it, but I
guess
understand you have the choice right now.
Well, Ray, I just want to know, and this is a question.
Yep.
And I really take your advice to heart because I know you know what you're saying, but the thing is, you said there's a few things that haven't been on the agenda. What would they be? And could we bring them to Stacy to put them on the agenda and have those experts here during our working meetings? I mean, I guess that's kind of what,
That was the first time tonight that I heard ideas were welcome on the agenda. I think this form of government puts too much power in fewer hands than regular government, than having committees that talk about things and bring results back to the full body. And I think we've limited that by going to this structure. Now, if anybody can put anything on the agenda, then my concern is we're gonna have these kind of discussions at every board meeting. You know, if anybody here has 2 or 3 things they want on that agenda, how does that get decided on what we talk about? You could have very long meetings.
that could be a definite full meeting, but I don't see that happening where everybody has 2 or 3 items to put on the agenda. But I mean, if there's something specific you want on the agenda, I would imagine we could get that through after we do our, regular meetings, and when we get into the working session, that's when we could have those.
And I guess
same
what
thing.
I've found is that the committee, for instance, if Matthew was not on that committee, you would spend the same amount of time convincing him about that one point because he wasn't on it. I think it gives everybody the opportunity, and if anything, it brings everybody's opinion right away rather than it going to a committee where 3 people, or, we've had some times where it didn't come out of committee, which is the process. But then it had to come again twice down the road. So I think this gives everybody an opportunity, and I would think that if we stay focused on the things that are board business and are important as agenda items, then I don't think that they would get,
Overwhelmed.
yeah,
As I said, that's my opinion, and I think this is a mistake, but
Can I,
that's,
having been on these committees, seems to me that, the problem with it is, Biff, is the things on the committees, at least in my experience, were very, very narrow. It would be like, I was chair of the personnel committee for 1 year. And it would like, well, I like working with the person that was the personnel director at the time. And she would call up and say, well, we need to have a meeting on this. And I would say, okay, well, I guess, since you do this all the time, that's what we need to have a meeting on. And so, in a sense, it was like, well, we kind of facilitated the administration on that. So I don't know if what you're saying, if we had committees, we'd have greater depth and bigger discussion and, and really burrow into the research or something like that. I just didn't ever see that happen. So in a sense, it was like, well, okay, 3 of us would sit around and talk about it. And, Stacy would always object and we'd kind of talk around that. And then we'd do a vote and then it turned out to be, 2 to 1. And we'd bring the recommendation and Stacy would say in the meeting, this is the reason why I dissented on this. And it didn't facilitate a great deal of like, wow, we really created specialists out of this. And then I was chair of the Buildings and Grounds Committee. And the same thing, it was like, oh, gee, we need to talk about the, the water changer, the air changer or something like that. Up in Lincoln, we'd go up and we'd take a tour and Chris would say, well, we really have to do this. And it was like, well, shit, who's going to argue with you? And so it really was a kind of a rubber stamper thing. So I understand that, but I do think there's one thing that really could be facilitated. If we had designated people that were designated to be the sort of the contact person, the information getting person on the five pillar things.
And I have seen that done at
See, the deal is that is on buildings and grounds, you know, I talk to Chris, you know, maybe 3 times a week or something like that. And so I would be in on stuff that the rest of the committee wasn't in on, that I could then bring up during the meeting. But I don't know if we couldn't do something better and have a combination of the two and say, all right, you be in charge of, you know, you be the buildings and grounds person, and you get to know Mike real well and get to know what's going on and, you know, and what the concerns are, et cetera, so that you could then bring that to the board, which if we were acting as the committee of the whole, would then be
That's interesting.
something that would automatically
I've
be
seen that done
discussed.
at other board meetings. I mean,
Yeah, and,
Interesting.
you know, and Matt could be, well, maybe you should be the building and grounds guy, but, you know, and you could be the, you know, you could be the curriculum person, and you would talk to Tennis and the gang there and say, well, you know, because you would probably understand it better than most of us. And then raise your questions to them, have them explain what their thinking is. You know, it would come as an informational thing that would reflect a number of points of view, or, you know, your point of view, or, you know.
It would create buy-in too from that board member that's.
Yeah, but I just think that if it hits us cold, like, you know, the policy stuff like this, it's like, holy God, what am I supposed to, you know, how am I supposed to think about this? And I don't want to be here till midnight, you know? But if, you know what I'm saying?
I do.
You know,
I do, I think
Sounds
it's
like
very.
almost like a board liaison like we have in schools.
Board liaison, yeah.
I think the part of the reason too, kind of going what you're saying, is the agenda was never set by the board. And that's what we've lost, is that it needs to be a partnership, but the board needs to be driving what is important, what is the information that we need as a board to be able to make the best decisions possible. And that's what I never.
If the board liaison person thought, oh geez, we really have to talk about this, it would be on the agenda.
Right.
Yeah. One of the things I would just like to reinforce is what Stacy was suggesting, is that whatever you do, I think what you want to do is, what you did it create higher achievement levels? You know, so, you know, when you're talking about your work, your ultimate work, as the school board has over the years tried to pound into boards, your top priority is raising and sustaining student achievement levels. And I think, you know, some of the efficiencies of what we're talking about, and remember the article that I shared about effective boards. One of the measures of your success, about how successful you've been, is you have high achievement. If you are, you've been successful. If you haven't, you're doing something wrong. And I think that that's part of the conversation. I can work with any model. I just want to help you get the return you're looking for. And what is the return?
Carrie, can I talk?
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is like,
Sorry.
one board member will call liaison for now, but then they would have to we would require them to tie to the strategic plan, what is the agenda item? So that furthers the macro plan of the Board of Education. And then when they present with whatever information that they had to have them speak about, they could tie the strategic plan with what they thought was their opinion, you know?
Yeah, that's a little complicated for me, but I would just, you know, if I were the building and grounds guy, I'd just talk to Mike and say, okay, how's it going? What's up? What new stuff have you discovered that we need to think about? What problems are you having, et cetera, et cetera? And how is that affecting in any way, you know, the educational program? And, you know, and if you know, I could report in every meeting, but there might be some meetings but I would only make a report, you see. What happens with the committees is you get the committees deciding by a 2-to-1 vote what the person in personnel wanted to have happen. And then it comes to the board, and the committee chair, on behalf of the committee, recommends that we pass that. And everybody says, well, I guess, they covered it in committee, so it's just a kind of it's just a double stamp thing.
Rubber stamp, you're right.
That's the way it was working, but maybe you have.
I have not had that
better-
experience on city council or county board. That at every meeting, each committee reported if they had something to say.
Yeah.
But the other nice part about that is if you were buildings and grounds and you did your report and somebody had a concern, they would bring it up and then Mike or whoever was there would hear about it, or you would hear about it, take it back to them. Hey, how come this isn't getting done?
Yeah, right.
How come this isn't happening? So there was that input that was able to get communication going back to say, this needs to be done. Or we've had this complaint about this curriculum or tax rate for next year. Where's it going to be? And it was a report from every area to say, this is what's going on. It was also an opportunity for people sitting around this table to tell that committee or that person, director, hey, I've heard this concern from the public. Is it real or not?
So I think with county board, there's 25 members, right? Is that true?
Yeah.
So I think with a bigger group, I think then you have a better distribution of, otherwise, what he's articulating about the 2-to-3, the 2-to-1 vote, that's what I experienced 100% last year as well. So everything Carrie just said, I completely agree with. And I like that we got to figure out, I would like to do a hybrid because I think with the number of board members that we have, I think we need to somehow do it differently a little bit so that we don't just create the 2-to-1 vote on this.
Well, I also think.
And then the rubber stamp that goes to the next rubber stamp, because it needs to be led by a member working with the administration instead of the administration coming down and then saying that we need to have a meeting about this.
Which I think everything that he said that needs to get done and would be getting done in committees, or at least what he's experienced, could be done by exactly with kind of what Carrie was proposing. I gotta say I like that idea.
I do like his idea, but with a liaison or something, or like a go-to or.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, or you
Or we
wanna
could call it a liaison
we
or a
could bring
contact
it-
person, or whatever you wanna call it.
We could have that on the agenda for the next meeting on Tuesday.
Another good idea for Carrie Trask.
I think
Well, Biff doesn't think it's, but it's okay.
I think the other thing is we have all our experts here. They're all here in this one room to be able to answer all those questions that we might have. That again, I'm looking for a collective agenda that's driving. And again, that's why I keep going back to the strategic plan, because even in the strategic plan, it's very specific on the things that a board agreed that we thought was most important, that was going to be return on investment. And so those should be the things. I went through the last year and a half of every single item that was on each committee to see, what was on there, and the majority of them are updates, which is fine, but do you have to have a committee meeting to provide updates to the whole group, which is gonna be beneficial anyway? I think the other thing that would be helpful is a timeline of when things are gonna come up. Because, there's a lot of times where we have to hear about the gap reduction or certain forms, things like that. Where if you knew that was on the agenda of when, a certain curriculum was going to be looked at, or, our team has already created that for the next, 3 to 5 years of when that's going to come up, to our whole group. So So, I mean, if we have the majority, can we at least try? I'm suggesting that we try this. We look at the liaisons, knowing that we can bring stuff forward, you know, on agenda, you know, to the agenda.
And if there's updates, like you said, a lot of it was updates, that would be something that you do, like a personnel liaison or contact person. A section of our agenda on our meetings could be, you know, like a pillar presentation, you know what I mean? For each one of those pillars, could be something to where, oh, I don't have nothing this month, you know, it's been going smooth, so I'll just pass it right along. Or we have this, I'd like to update you on this as to what's going on, whatever, you know what I mean?
Right. As
And that would
long
be the
as
same thing a committee does without actually having to go through that and just gather all those people just to get updates from somebody they're already doing their job. That's the whole point. I mean, I think the whole point is for us, you know, a successful person attracts, you know, the right person, and then they trust them to do their job. And that's kind of like what we were hoping to do essentially with all this. So, I don't know,
I suggest that we make a policy or just some sort of internal rule that any agenda item has to be able to tie off to that strategic plan, to one of those pillars. And I also think it would be a good idea just to have that thing printed off and put it on the walls in here, just so everyone can kind of constantly be reminded of, here's where we need to be focused on. And when we start to get off track, if that can happen occasionally, we're reminded of what we all agree were the most important things.
that's something you could write up and present.
Yeah, that's always the hard part, is all up in my head, and every time I try to narrow it down, it's crazy. But yeah,
But if you put
I will
something
do
together,
that.
put it on the agenda.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have all this stuff on the walls, why don't we put our pillars up there?
Or somewhere.
Right?
You mean painted on?
Yeah, I mean, it just,
Honestly, you know,
it's something, if it's in your face, you see it all the time, you're just kind of reminded of. all right,
tattoo it on our
what-
arms.
What do we agree were the most important things, right? How are we gonna drive the district forward? How do we tie this topic to one of the pillars? Can we tie it to one of the pillars? If we can't, why are we talking about it?
But there's a lot of businesses you.
I appreciate that, because as I'm trying to prioritize the work of my administrative team and everybody else, there's three main things where most of our time is being spent right now: SFA implementation, culture, and the facilities plan. You know, because we recognize that if we accomplish this, a lot of other things are gonna start falling together.
Right.
Because you prioritized your work. And, you know, it's all about leverage, you know, and time and money, in terms of how to get the greatest return possible in terms of the amount of time you're spending.
Kind of like our guiding principles, maybe we put a 8x11 right here.
Okay, well,
We should get it tattooed on us.
I will formalize more of what we've talked about today, and how that might look with liaisons, and how we might, you know, again, drive those topics, you know, coming from, the strategic plan, so. Okay, any other questions, anything for the good of the order? Otherwise, I'll seek a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay,
I'll second.
second? By Tony? All right, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Okay, see, we didn't vote on anything tonight.